time it comes up. So
and decides to do an unprecedented experiment. Godwin removes the
In 2018, a team of researchers demonstrated that memories
What day of the week was Halloween 2011?
Monday.
Our memory begins with a fleeting but powerful stage called sensory memory.
The experiment was supposed to be simple. A few hours in a sterile lab, answering questions, and maybe staring at blinking lights. I volunteered because I needed the money, and the flyer promised compensation for participating in a study on memory enhancement. It sounded harmless enough. But now, I am not sure if I will ever be the same. The lab was tucked away on the edge of town, in a nondescript building that looked more like an abandoned warehouse than a cutting-edge research facility. Inside, the walls were stark white, the air smelled faintly of antiseptic, and the hum of machinery filled the silence. A woman in a crisp lab coat greeted me and led me to a small room with a single chair surrounded by wires and monitors. "This is where we will experiment," she said, her tone professional but distant. "You will be asked to recall specific memories while we monitor your brain activity. The process might feel unusual, but it is perfectly safe." I nodded and sat down. Electrodes were attached to my temples and forehead, and the chair reclined slightly as she adjusted the settings on a nearby console. A helmet-like device lowered onto my head, its surface covered in tiny glowing nodes. "Relax," she said. "Just focus on your memories." The first few minutes were uneventful. She asked me to recall simple things: my childhood home, my first day of school, the face of someone I loved. Images flickered in my mind, like slides on a projector. My mother's smile as she braided my hair, the smell of chalk dust in my kindergarten classroom, the warmth of sunlight streaming through the window on lazy Sunday mornings. But then something shifted. The images became sharper and more vivid than any memory I had ever experienced. It was as if I were reliving them in real time, feeling every sensation as though it were happening all over again. The hum of the machinery grew louder, and the lights on the helmet pulsed faster. "Good," she said from behind her console. "You are responding well." Suddenly, I saw something that did not make sense, a memory that was not mine. I was standing in a field under a blood-red sky, surrounded by towering stone monoliths etched with strange symbols. The air was heavy with the scent of ash and something metallic. A figure stood in front of me, a man with hollow eyes and an expression that chilled me to the bone. I gasped and tried to pull off the helmet, but it would not budge. "What is happening?" I shouted. She did not answer. Instead, she pressed a button on her console, and everything went dark. When I woke up, I was lying on a cot in another room. My head throbbed, and my thoughts felt scrambled like pieces of a puzzle that did not fit together anymore. The woman was gone, replaced by a man in an identical lab coat who handed me a bottle of water and told me to rest. "You did well," he said with an unsettling calmness. "The experiment is complete." I wanted to scream at him, demanding answers about what had just happened, but my voice felt trapped in my throat. Instead, I stumbled out of the building into the cold evening air. That night, as I lay in bed trying to make sense of everything, memories that were not mine happened again. They came unbidden and relentless, glimpses of places I had never been and people I had never met. I saw myself walking through an empty city with skyscrapers that seemed to stretch endlessly into the sky. The streets were silent, except for the distant sound of sirens echoing through the concrete canyons. In another vision, I stood at the edge of a cliff overlooking an ocean so vast it seemed to swallow the horizon. The waves crashed against jagged rocks below as storm clouds gathered overhead. Then came moments that felt impossibly intimate, like secrets whispered into my ear by someone who knew me better than I knew myself. A hand reaching for mine across a table lit by candlelight. Laughter shared under a canopy of stars. Tears shed alone in a room filled with shadows. But none of these moments belonged to me. The next morning, I decided to return to the lab for answers. When I arrived, it was empty. No researchers or equipment remained. It was as if they had vanished overnight without leaving a trace. Desperate for clarity, I began searching for clues about what had been done to me. My investigation led me to obscure scientific papers about memory manipulation experiments conducted by shadowy organizations with questionable ethics. The more I read, the more horrifying it became. Accounts of subjects who remembered events from alternate timelines or futures that had not yet come to pass. One paper described something chillingly familiar: temporal memory displacement. According to its authors, certain individuals could recall fragments of time outside their own experience. Memories from parallel realities or possible futures, triggered by experimental procedures designed to enhance cognitive function. I realized then what had happened. I was not remembering things from my past. I was remembering things that had not happened yet. The visions grew stronger until they began bleeding into my waking life. At first, they were fleeting. A flash of someone's face on a crowded subway platform, or an image of rain falling against the glass. But soon they became impossible to ignore. One day, while walking home from work through Central Park under clear skies, I suddenly saw myself standing there drenched head to toe while thunder rolled ominously overhead, and seconds later clouds gathered rapidly above as rain poured down unexpectedly, drenching everyone around. Reality itself seemed unstable, as though past, present, futures were colliding together unpredictably, leaving chaos behind wherever they collided. Finally came a moment of clarity amidst confusion when a stranger approached and whispered cryptically, "You are not alone. Others remember too." Before disappearing, leaving a haunting realization: this experiment may connect larger conspiracy spanning dimensions itself.